What's up, everyone? Welcome to my corner of the internet. I'm your host, Ryan Kramer, and this is Crossover Commerce, presented by PingPong Payments, the leading global payments provider helping sellers keep more of their hard-earned money. Hello, everyone. Welcome back once again to another episode of Crossover Commerce. I'm your host, Ryan Kramer, and this, like the intro said, is my corner of the internet where I bring the best and brightest in the Amazon and e-commerce industry. Call it my corner of the internet because there's so much content out there. There's so many places that you can go for information. I'm just glad you found my little space that I take up in the ether of the internet, if you will, to bring you the best and brightest Amazon news, relevant topics, and thought leaders in the industry to help apply to your business or help you start thinking about that to move the needle forward. That being said, this podcast is presented by PingPong Payments. Cross-border payment solutions have never been easier. And now with obviously 5 clicks, it has become you'd be able to open up a free account by sending or receiving money, helping your brand grow, whether that's paying out your VAs overseas or paying out a supplier and manufacturer. As you know, time is money. To get money in their hands quicker so they can release goods, to get it back to an Amazon warehouse, you, of course, want to use a solution that's going to be able to help you grow and put money to your bottom line. And you can do that with PingPong Payments. Sign up for a free account in the link below, or if you're listening to us, you can check that out in the show notes as well. Thank you, PingPong Payments, for sponsoring Crossover Commerce. That being said, again, welcome everyone. Again, this is episode 174 of Crossover Commerce. That means there's 173 different episodes of content that we've put out there already, anywhere from branding and marketing to Amazon growth tactics to strategies to logistics. You name it, we've covered a lot of those things. And every once in a while, and occasionally, I love to bring on friends of the show that have come on in the past that have just so much content. We need more than 1 hour to talk about it. Therefore, that's why I call them friends of the show, and I bring them back on applicable different things when there's stuff going on in the news. And I think that there's just great content that needs to be shared. So that being said, we have a friend of the show, Chris Freiberger of nReach. He's going to be hopping on with us today. And you know what? This is one of my favorite topics to discuss if you're a listener to the show, and one of the more fascinating things to grow in its infancy as it is right now. Where are these different these paths moving forward for brands? Obviously, there's people 3 years ago or maybe 4 years ago we're talking about, I didn't even know that brands could exit a business or buy brands on Amazon. Now it seems like there's an endless amount. But now, as years progressed, or 16 months or 18 months, as a lot of these businesses have grown, what's our learnings? Obviously, a lot of people tell you how to optimize your business to grow and exit your business. But on the flip side, what are those challenges on the aggregator side of the space, and how are they looking at things now that they're 16 months in, or 2 years or 3 years into this ether? What are the challenges that they're going to be facing moving forward, and kind of put on our crystal ball, put down the crystal ball, and put on our fortune telling hats and kind of look at what the industry is telling us in the future and how this is going to continue to progress. So without further ado, I want to welcome back to Crossover Commerce, friend of the show, Chris Freiberger. Chris, welcome back, joining us from space, obviously, today, right?
I'll explain that in a little bit, but Ryan, thank you so much and thank you to Crossover for having me back on. I think it was back on, or it was on in June or January. I'm sorry. And thanks again for having me on. And then shout out to PingPong as well. But yeah. Ryan, thank you again for having me on. I'd love to talk about this stuff, as you know, and there's so many things to talk about, including this space station that was just announced yesterday. With the orbital reef. But yeah,
that's what we looked it up pre-show, and we found what it was called. I just kind of rolled my eyes and told Chris, if you're listening to this, it's the 3D rendering of what Amazon has, or Blue Origin, excuse me, not Amazon. Jeff Bezos's company, Blue Origin, has come out with a mock-up of what a space station would look like, and orbital reef is what they called it. We were jokingly saying, like, what does that mean? Is that the 21st marketplace that Amazon is going to is now space? Like, they've just bypassed all the different countries. But yeah, we can definitely talk about that today. So you're the guy, and for people who haven't listened to our first podcast, I've made introductions to you before. You've done vice versa. Your network is so expansive, and I like to pride myself on knowing things going on in the industry. You're the guy who actually can connect those people, and you know businesses that are being successful. You kind of make those handshakes, those happenings, and we've called you the Amazon networker, or the I forget what matchmaker. I was gonna
Yeah,
say, yeah,
yeah,
almost like My Fair Lady or things like that, or the matchmaker. So,
sure.
so what does that mean? Again, for like a quick 30 seconds, like what does that mean, and how did you get in that space?
Sure. Yeah, I will end up in space, I guess, if that makes sense. Just maybe if I may, just I'll share a little bit of personal stuff on me, at least that maybe others that don't necessarily know. Is I'm actually from the Midwest. I'm in Cincinnati, sort of. Other than the East Coast, maybe New York and the like is actually a hub of advertising, and kind of grew up here. My grandfather actually was in advertising. Actually produced a book that's actually still taught today at some business schools. And then my dad was in advertising, worked at Procter and Gamble. And then lo and behold, unbeknownst to my best efforts, because believe it or not, I did graduate in aerospace engineering from Iowa State. That seems about 10 lifetimes ago, maybe or so.
Oh man, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, and did nothing with it because to tie it together, really my first job was I was plunked down in front of Netscape 1.0 on a very clunky, PC at the time, and just never looked back. Fell in love with the internet. Back then, if you knew HTML, your career kind of accelerated from there. I want to talk about how many hops I've had between there and then, but kind of models a little bit of the internet, if you will. But mostly, my background is in the ad agency world, applying digital marketing, the life of the internet, if you will, expressed across the media world, the marketing world. And so in many roles within those small agencies, in case the first employee, in some cases working for large agencies, again, lo and behold, back in the walls of Procter and Gamble, like my forebears, a little bit. All of that said, about 3 years ago, that whole industry, the ad agency world, the marketing world, if you will, really hasn't reacted to Amazon, and that was 3 years ago. For instance, they do all the digital stuff, Google, Facebook, including, influencers, things. In some cases, actually do all the creative, the brand, the expression of that brand, add, campaigns within that, video, all of the content that needs to be created, including Super Bowl commercials, right? But that whole industry is just has not figured out or entered the Amazon space. And thus we exist, right? This bubble of Amazon folk exist. And so what does nReach do in all of that, given that background, is I'm basically just a network of resources in the space. I like to pride myself on knowing, especially in the agency, the Amazon agency world, I like to know what's going on. I specialize in helping brands and marrying them to agencies that are mature enough in an immature space to then execute all the things that they need to do. I vet folks and I sort of introduce folks. I'm a matchmaker is what I do. So I
Which
don't
I
know if that.
love. And that, yeah, well, and that's the thing too. And I know people, they just aren't aware of whether it's the time that they're growing their own business and service, or, heads down, there's so much content that's being put out there, but also so many different businesses that crop up because of it. And because it's such an immature industry, like you said, I think I've only heard people, if they say if I've been on Amazon for 10 plus years, that instantly makes me think, my gosh, you've been around for almost the inception of Amazon, which is clearly not true.
Yeah.
But for even people to there's many skips of things, right? There's the technology world of how long Amazon's been around, 1993, four, something like that. 96, I think, is when he seven. Yeah, I was gonna say mid to late 97. And then you have the people, Amazon as a company, so people are aware of that. But then knowing for Amazon's the different tiers, right? I think we talked about this too.
Yeah.
Of people don't even know that there's businesses that are selling on Amazon. It's a marketplace, not Amazon has all these products they're selling. People are selling through Amazon's network and distributing and selling. And the majority of it is people like you and me in our houses or in our offices doing that. And that's where the industry itself sits. And then there's the public, and they don't even know that exists too. So that's you start to scale up and tier up, and you're like the 1% of a 1% in this case of business. It hasn't been around long, so that's why it's so fascinating. Like you and I were just talking about, it's like, I
Yeah.
heard about this, I heard about this, I heard about this. Like there's so many passing pieces of information. So how do you kind of keep your eye on all the different things that are happening? Do you
Yeah.
have a tool or tip or a trick that you can share?
Well, it's a small world. To run off of what you had, and I don't mean to run too far ahead, and I apologize. Is that
Sure.
there is an ecosphere that has gone around, basically the helping either selling on Amazon or helping folks on Amazon. Okay, and so that I call that the ecosphere. That there's Amazon everything. There are Amazon lawyers. There are Amazon accountants. There are Amazon HR people that are hiring for the space, which we'll talk about at length. There are Amazon API programmers, okay, very specialized. And then there are Amazon agencies, okay. And when I say that is all they're usually doing is optimizing for Amazon and blocking and tackling in the process of selling on Amazon, which is another thing we'll talk about how hard it is to sell on Amazon. It's extremely hard. It's not something that somebody can just do or a company can just do. And so these agencies are the only ones that know kind of how to do this stuff, or at least the concentration of those things. And as a result of that, which we'll talk about, they're extremely valuable. But I want to switch my background off of the space station, which will probably look like something different, and just kind of just round out and say that, to kind of go with what you were saying, Ryan, is very early in the life of Amazon. You might think that Amazon pervades, you see their trucks out everywhere, and it pervades our U.S. streets, if you will, but that's not the case around the globe, and they are just getting started. They're at 14 official marketplaces, but those cover 50 plus countries. They cover a majority, something on the order of like 20% of the available people are reached by Amazon only so
Right.
far. So
yeah.
So behind.
Yeah, there's so many different things, like technically 20 plus marketplaces. Of that, there's only
20.
open to public. The 20th was Egypt, that opened up this year. But again, people are anywhere from 15 to 20. That either of, I think it's Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Egypt, doesn't even pale in comparison to 1% of what Amazon's traffic is. So again, three of those only is equates to 1%, and the majority is obviously India, United States, UK, and gosh, I want to say it's for population wise, I'm going to say Japan. I think those are the top four, which makes more sense. But in that regards, like you said, it's 40%. Again, for the stat nerds out there with me,
Okay,
Amazon's
please.
only 40% of e-commerce, but then of that of that e-commerce bubble, it's only 10 to 15% of all of retail spend. So again, if you think Amazon's big, and it is in the world of e-commerce, then you put that in the world of all of purchasing, it's still very small. And that's what a lot of people are really not struggling with, what a lot of people don't see of how big it can potentially get once you build out an ecosystem like that. So
right. And we'll use an example, and thank you. I throw stats as well, and we'll just go with big. But that said, a good example be like Brazil with Mercado Libre, which they're still not the dominant marketplace for ordering product inland, in that country. But they don't have the infrastructure and the technology that's coming at them, including what could be behind me, right? Could easily be what it was actually intended to be, rentable manufacturing space for zero-G manufacturing, which is a big industry that actually kind of fuels the whole space program. Again, I'm an aerospace engineer, just in the sense I follow that. And what this actually means is that, this is all space. It could be some entertainment space. These are all modules that are in the back, behind me. But moreover, it could also be an Amazon distribution center, and then things like drones and things like that could be dropped out of orbit. It's really going to be there. Think about what Amazon's going to be in 50 years. Okay. Think about what the railroad did in the last 50 years, but accelerated, whatever the exponent is that you want to apply to that. And so it's going to end in space. And that's why I kind of want to start with this, but I will switch back to something a little bit less, scary and, laser, space laser-y. But
right. And I mean, if we could use something like that to alleviate any sort of logistics change right now, that'd be a game changer right now. But that's the thing too, right? Of maybe segueing into the future of what the third-party world, or what Amazon in terms of the small seller world, right? There's lots of things going on, and you can hit it from 100 different ways. There's the government action of what potentially could have happen to small business sellers on Amazon. There's what it applies to in terms of monopoly, how brands are acquiring or just growing on Amazon. There's the play by our rules and the whole shutting down big time business that's happening on Amazon. There's so many different things that are being juggled around of the Amazon ecosystem. But as future kind of prevails, there's emerging innovations happening, right? That's what the topic I'll call with it. And one of those things a lot of people are talking about, and I'll throw up our topic for the day, is the aggregator space. And pre-show, we were talking about, man, there, we said aggregator and we knew what we meant, but now it's almost like forked in the road even from there. The differences between, agency, aggregator, accelerator, growth, brand accelerator, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Is there a quick definition that we can break down for everyone who's listening, just to simplify terms and we can kind of all be on the same page in that regard?
Yeah. I won't go too deep because there are other terms that are being kind of thrown around, and it is an industry where it's so new and it's so we're trying to all catch up to Amazon. There's also this ecosphere that's kind of falling out, and even those people are starting to consolidate, right? And even so young that the terminology is also kind of being defined, right? And so there was a term that's popped up called an aggregator, right? And all an aggregator really is a large seller, right? Again, we're all selling on Amazon. That's kind of the gist of it, right? So amongst large sellers, there are different types, and one of those types is an aggregator. And what an aggregator does is, instead of being just one brand that sells on Amazon, like just a typical seller that has maybe one or multiple brands, but they're one seller, right? An aggregator goes and buys up multiple brands, right? Groups of brands. And the idea is that an aggregator, through scaling, through better technology, through better knowledge, through consolidation and sort of economies of scale, also because, hey, did I mention this stuff is really hard? And if they can figure it out better than the person that had sold it on Amazon to date, right? So it might be a brand, for instance, that sold for $2 million to date. The owner put their blood, sweat, and tears into it, and it's now $2 million brand on Amazon, right? These aggregators will come along, offer them current rates between like 6 and 8, maybe 10x and growing, right? To grab those brands when they know that other than that one guy, they know my team behind me can go further and increase sales faster further than that guy could have, right? And I'm going to pay him out on performance of that brand. And that's the whole game right now with aggregators. Okay. So in aggregators, multiple brands, think of them like groups of brands that they bought internally. They own those brands and they have to grow those brands. Okay. So that's one term. That's an aggregator.
Right.
An accelerator is a little different. They have kind of an easier job of it, right? An accelerator is like a Target, right? Like a retailer. Okay. They're going to buy, they're going to go to a brand that says, you know what, we don't want to mess with Amazon. We don't have the skills for this, or we know that you can do it better. So it's better just to outsource it. You're a better plumber. I'm just going to have you do it. Right. And so all they have to do, they buy inventory. They ask for exclusivity to sell on Amazon. Right. And they say, okay, I'm going to take your brand in. I'm going to buy a bunch of inventory into my warehouse. And all I have to do is move that product. Okay. I don't own the brand. If I need assets like video or a Super Bowl commercial, or I need you to grow an audience through social media and Twitter, that's all the brand's job, right? I just have to move product. Okay. So examples of each, right? An aggregator would be, say, the top one is Thrasio right now, Heyday, Perch. Okay, so these are some of the big ones, and there are right now 68 aggregators out there, 70 depending on who you count, right? Right now they're sharing somewhere up near close to a $10 billion to buy brands internally. Okay, big business. Now on the other side, the aggregators with big players are Spreetail. There's also Pattern there. Okay, I'm sorry, the accelerators, Spreetail and Pattern. Okay, and again, those guys are big, and they're printing money because they don't have all the headaches, right, of owning the brand. And we'll get into that more, which is the topic of this podcast. Okay,
Right.
is the challenges that they have. Okay, so I'll stop there. But does that help?
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, and we actually had Channel Key. We had Dan Brownshire of Channel Key. He actually is co-founder and founder of it. And I asked him the same question. I go, how do you distinguish when people come to you and say, I want my brand to be operated, I want them to just like sell my product, or I want it to be, collaborative in that approach. And that's what our agency. And he goes, honestly, there's just a lot of people in different parts in their business. They want all of those things, and there's space for everyone. And depending on who you are, that's the fascinating thing about the space, is how you define agency too, because there's PPC agency there. Like we said before, you put Amazon in front of anything, Amazon photography, Amazon video editing, like that instantly becomes like a very popular service potentially for millions of brands that are on Amazon. I think 6 million plus sellers and growing. And that will continue just to obviously grow over time and whatnot. And we're not even talking about like 1P, so first party. Quickly on that question, for an accelerator, is that more of a 1P approach or is that more of a third party approach?
It,
Is that
it, it
it could be both.
there's actually iterations of both.
Okay,
Yeah, really depends on. Well, I guess it just depends on the approach. But there's that
sure,
model applies. The idea here again is that really the model is just like, I don't want to deal with this. Here's all the keys and exclusivity. Go run it as a channel again, like Target would. They buy a lot of stuff, they put it in the back, and they sell it in their store, and that's essentially what they're doing. So
gotcha. Perfect. So yeah, for this definition, we want to kind of break away from the agency and the accelerator part, and then we'll kind of compare the two, obviously. But for aggregators, man, I remember February of last year, and when the first name of Thrasio came out, and again, great people, had multiple people on this podcast. I think they're doing great things for the third party space in this regards. Just this week, I want to say, or on Monday, it was announced that they raised a $1 billion round, a Series D equity channel, and that was just the number is just phenomenal and crazily can think about, but quantifiably, it's going towards equity. I believe most of it is. So obviously, with lots of these different companies, a lot of it is debt or the opportunity to borrow that money, buy the business, and then at one point or another scale that business. So for an aggregator, lots of people are thinking, oh, they're just going to take over. They're going to be there's going to be 10 people in the space that are just going to be running brands across all the channels. First and foremost, is that ever going to happen? Will they ever take over every single brand that's operating on Amazon or more than majority? Do you ever think that would happen, or is it not
yeah,
going to happen?
I use an analogy of real estate here. So, think of that as like the play here for an aggregator is really like flipping houses. Okay. They know they can come along, they can see the owner, maybe put a fence up and, cut the yard clean, but they know the value, if they put in, a wing on the back, right? Or do it faster, better than the next guy, right? So the answer is there's millions of houses, there's millions of brands, right? So no one could own them all by any means. And in fact, owning 1,000 of them doesn't mean anything to the other, millions, right? And so there's plenty of room here. That's not the limiting factor at all. I don't think there's plenty of great brands and lots of gems out there born from Amazon and or would be accelerated on Amazon, to unprecedented scale. It's a beautiful model and absolutely because there's the only thing, it's a long term versus a short term, right? And an accelerator is like, I'm just going to print money, as just going to move product, right, and get paid for that. Awesome, right? Well, an aggregator is basically like, I'm going to invest in babies, right? And I'm going to invest in a nursery. I'm going to grow those babies over time. I'm going to invest, college money, all of this, long-term play in these things. And at the end of that, the babies multiply and but they're also worth, in some cases, it could be a household brand that you've grown from nothing, and it's $1 billion brand. So in the end, the exit could be, if you execute on all these things properly, if much higher than say, the accelerators, which are like, nah, 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 kind of right now in the sense that, they have an easier job of it, sort of like the tortoise and the hare kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And so
Sure.
anyway,
Yeah, and there's place for both to play, and I like that analogy of like you're investing in almost like a newborn's future of however mature it is, whether you're taking it on as a infant, teenager, whatever it is, you're actually looking for their job is to actually it's almost like a risk tolerance bet, right? If you're looking at insurance of how much can I cover this, or until it gets to like a loss and we can't actually like rake in money with these people, we want to make sure that at some point or another, it's going to be a long-term investment. It's going to yield results year over year, and we're not going to lose money on it. So by looking at the background, the market, the landscape, everything like that, that's what's so interesting and challenging, where so many people are entering the space. And I say so many, 70 is not a lot. Like again, there's so many, there's a lot of different companies that can agency wise, SaaS wise, there's lots of different tools, services out there in the market space, whether you do it individually or at scale. Lots of people came in quickly with this, and if it wasn't one, it became 10, and then 25, and then 40, and then all of a sudden, like you said, we're we're doing everything publicly. And again, this is all public. You have people operating without making public knowledge of what they're doing.
Yes.
That being said, is there space for that amount of people to succeed on as it sits today? So 70 are going to be around in a year as 70.
Yes. You look how many, we'll just pick on the agencies again. How many agencies there are in the non-Amazon world? I mean, in Cincinnati, you can throw a stone, maybe hit 3 or 4 digital agencies. One of them might be an SEO agency, right? But for the most part, there's a bunch of creatives downtown. I could have, sorry, pre-COVID, hit a bunch of, with one stone downtown. I think eventually that's where this is going to be. In fact, I think eventually those are going to eventually learn these skills of Amazon. It's going to merge together eventually. But, we're talking about 20 years, at least 10 to adopt, 20 to adopt Facebook. We're still figuring out social media. And some respects, Google AdWords is more important than ever, and so on and so forth. And so it's just a very slow industry to adopt, right? These types of skills. And so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not, but it's kind of why it exists, this space exists.
Well, and the business model makes sense to me too. And there's lots of people at play. I think maybe if we went down the challenges of the model, how I always understood it from the basics and the mechanics and levers perspective was at the beginning, go to page one, find the top performing sellers, use data and analytics to see what it is on a month-to-month basis, where you can improve it. And the selling feature is, how do you not want to do you want to not do this anymore, whether it be for money reasons, for headache reasons, anything like that? We'll take that over. But there's also that little chunk that we can operate and grow and make profit on it even more than our initial investment.
Yes.
That's just like acquisitions in general. But everyone, if you have 80 different companies going after, again, not an infinite number of categories, definitely a
Sure.
lot, but there's a lot that aren't getting touched. For example, electronics, topical, consumable. A lot of people don't even want to touch toys or child to a point.
Sure.
Anything that's really breakable, not really sustainable, and
Cer-
it's not repeatable business.
Certain margin. Yeah.
Certain margin, yeah, exactly. So at some point, you start to think about with top people in the space, if they're consistent, they've only been around a little bit while. Is there a gap that, or like a ceiling that
Yeah.
theoretically, if one brand and they're the top brand, they're the top dog and they're going to be the top dog forever, you shut down that lane for essentially anyone else to be optimized, or you're trying to compete with them on a constant basis. Is there a notion of which those top people might all just be acquired by aggregators at some point, or is that where it's going, or do you think that there's always going to be ways around those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be the option of selling to an aggregator, right? I mean, that's always
Mhm.
that's an exit, and I would say even like a new exit that's, again, as you say, a couple of years old for these brands that just sort of sprung up, and oh, by the way, you can get more money going through that exit, which is nice, right? And also, I've seen it just accelerating brand owners, efforts on Amazon to get to that multiple that exists right now. I don't think it'll go down a little bit, but it'll exist for a while. But to your question, is there a ceiling on any of this? No. I think, and you're already seeing this, and it's already, not that I predicted, but smarter than I predicted, it's actually going to kind of shatter. It's going to go the other way. I think you already see small brand groups, which is kind of another term in this space, where it's, again, they're sellers, they're selling on Amazon, right? But within that, they're a different kind of bird where they sort of bought maybe a couple, maybe there's mini aggregator, if you maybe look at them that way. They bought a couple brand groups, maybe within a category, maybe not, maybe they're different categories to spread risk, right? But they figured out maybe they have an internal team or a partner that's an agency that they trust that can actually do this stuff. And they have a group of investors, maybe 4 or 5 guys that invest in those brands, that little 3 or 4 brands, and they have somebody that's growing them. And just like flipping a house or investing in, an investor or putting it on stock market, which I think it's maybe even a better analogy. You're seeing these groups, just these little investment groups and brands, right? Coming out of this ecosphere, right? Which is smart because what's going to grow faster and if done well, than in the greatest marketplace to ever exist, and
Right.
so yeah.
Well, that's what was fascinating when you look at the model and you're like, of course you want to obtain the top, like top sellers, right? Like you can almost put on your books a consistent amount of revenue year over year, it's going to be there. For example, notoriously, I think it's Thrasio who mentioned we bought the number one selling pillow on Amazon, Beckham Brands. I believe that's what the brand. I actually have one. Like, believe it or not, you're welcome, Thrasio, if you're listening. I've purchased, I believe, 4 of them. Like, because they're freaking nice. They're really nice. But they're like been around for 5 years, right? It's an evergreen product, which means it's going to be consistent. You're going to need new pillows around. People are always going to go back to it. It could be a repeat purchase. You can theoretically get better costs on products and things like that. But there's only so much room for opportunity, right? It's not like taking something from 100 to 10. It's taking one and keeping it at one, which in theory seems a lot more expensive in my eyes. Like there's not that much opportunity for growth. But when I'm starting to hear, and maybe this is the case now, people are looking not just for top performers, but maybe underperformers, great ideas, maybe more of that middle of the road, not as, turning out number one sellers, but maybe in that middle tier, they just don't have that push and they can offer that push over the line and be a really big investment in play and low risk, high reward play in products. Is that where it's shifting towards more?
Yeah, well, in the aggregator model, yeah. I mean, again, there's other models out there, right? And
Sure.
there's even within the aggregator model, there's actually a couple models. Like there's, shout out to Stephen Pope for giving me this one, but there's aggregators and then there's consolidators. So an aggregator actually kind of takes over the brand, all the functions of it, so the ad campaign, all that stuff that was managed by the seller they may come along for the ride or they may not. It might be just a complete buyout and we'll take the keys, we'll go, right? And so an aggregator would just kind of bring it in and they aggregate everything kind of like a machine. Bad analogy. Versus a consolidator actually kind of invites maybe by 60% of the seller, invites them over. There's still there may be a gentle handoff, or they're part of the team to see that grow going forward, which solves some of the next stuff we're going to talk about, which is the hiring problem in this space.
Right.
So yeah, so even you see it sort of developing as before your eyes right now.
Right. So that's a great next question. So not just the challenges of obviously finding brands. So we put that pin a little bit in there, and it's always going to be a constant challenge of, hey, are you in the market to purchase right now? No, you're good. Okay, well, next person. And I always hear the story, brand owners like tens of emails every single week. Hey, how is the brand going? How can we talk about the valuation? We're going to offer 7x, 10x. I mean, I've heard hearing 10x, and that seems crazy. But again, people just acquiring brands to put in their portfolio. And again, there's only so many out there. Like if you did the math, a lot of them range anywhere from 1 to 10 brands.
Sure.
Pretty decent amount, which is a good amount. You have that next tier of 10 to 25, another healthy amount. Then you have like 50 to 200 brands, and then you got your like top tier, like right, people are acquiring quite a bit at scale. You mentioned it before, people,
Yeah.
and on average, I'm constantly hearing anywhere from 7 to 10 people per brand that you're operating. So
Oh, you heard that stat? That's an interesting stat.
well, that's just on for a team for marketing, and again, that's across the board on average, anywhere from 7 to 10 people who are touching brand. Even on an agency model, makes sense, right? We have on a month-to-month basis, you have 7 to 10 people who are touching that brand, whether it be creative, it could be logistics, it could be just operator in general, PPC, anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
7 to 10, if I'm thinking about the math, and I have 200 brands, that instantly puts me at what 20,000 people, or close to, is that 20,000 or 2,000? That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people power. And as the economies of scale doesn't make sense for growth in that capacity. So what's the people problem for an aggregator right now? I guess is my question.
Yeah, and maybe another way, and this is just indicative of how we're like running through the fog, and we're all like, what piece of information do you have? What piece of, so we don't run into a wall, right? Another thing I saw out there, and I can't remember who had done the survey, but it was recent. They'd sent out a survey to the aggregators and asking them questions about themselves. There is a survey from Fortia Group, and shout out to them. From some other questions, but it's not the one I'm thinking of. But somebody had done a poll about what their plans for hiring was, and they came to 7,000. Well, 30 something of them, of the 70 responded, and of those respondents, the total hires, if you added up what the response was was 7,000 by Christmas.
Of this year. They need 7,000 total, 7,000 more people
By
to
the end of the
run
year.
brands.
Yeah. Or by the
That's
end
a
of the year.
lot. That's a lot of growth. And I know the stat too. I'm looking at, so take that number, and I know Thrasio. Again, we look at Thrasio because it's the biggest number out there and it's the biggest one to kind of slice and dice, right? It's a little bit easier. 100 people a month that they were averaging consistently. So if you're taking just 100 on the biggest person under the under aggregator umbrella, where's the makeup come from? And that's what I'm trying to figure out is
Yeah.
the math doesn't align, and there's a complete shortage of talent, people power versus the brand power that they're acquiring. So
Yeah.
what does that mean? What does that mean? What's that going to look like in Q4?
Yeah, so there's a term here that applies. I don't think I'm the first to say it, but if you hear it, maybe it came from me. And that the term applies is acquihire. Okay, it's a old term. You might learn it at Harvard. On a page in a book or something like that. But it basically is the concept is pretty popular in the sense that you would buy a company for their people, not for their revenue or product or anything they're producing. In fact, in some cases, all that's shed for the team and the talent that they have, and really, the individual talent. In some cases, the leadership that put that talent together, and the overall functioning F1 racing team. That can't be found elsewhere. Okay, and that's an acquihire moment when I'm going to spend top dollar for teams. I don't care where I'm going to find them. So examples. I use there's a Netscape moment, but the easy one that I think if you were to look at the wiki page on acquihire is Facebook. Facebook back in 2001, when it first blew up, you couldn't hire programmers that knew anything. You couldn't spell social media. I mean, it wasn't even invented yet. They invented it. And so they actually bought again, stop me. There's some companies that they hired that were like SaaS solutions, and they
Mhm.
had 10,000 users. They fired the users and shut down the service and took those employees and ran off to
You
Silicon
work for
Valley
us
with
now,
them.
exactly.
Yeah, and they produce Facebook. Okay, so we're in that space now. I would even contend that it's actually, I would say it's 10x any of those moments. And the reason I say that is because it involves all of e-commerce, really. And when I say Amazon, I think all about e-commerce. It either owns it, or it is it, or it will be it. So that's greater than, say, the monetary opportunity of all of social media, right? And then one could also argue that Facebook didn't own all of social media, right? And so that boom, or you maybe take another boom like mobile boom, right? There was more than one player in the mobile space, right? There was eventually more than one Netscape, but I think it's more at this point. I think Amazon owns all the things, so it's going to be even more importance to solve for Amazon than any of those moments. Certainly business wise and e-commerce wise, and maybe pharmaceutical wise, and maybe space wise, and a bunch of other wises, right?
Right. And that's what's, maybe this is just the beginning of this massive shift. Whether it be massive or not, again, is the eye of the beholder. Just when you see money come into the space and you don't know when no one knows what that means. I think a lot of people see it as panic. When other people, if you're an innovator, you see it as opportunity, right? That's why you saw the stem of lots of different aggregators and whatnot. When when I say the phrase acquihire, I'm using it because I heard it from you, and to me that makes sense, right? Because economies of scale, you're talking about massively, instead of individually hiring out, building an individualized team one on one.
Yes.
Why not either subcontract out essentially, or just purchase outright business, partner with them to run those brands, and then all of a sudden, you have marketing team, you have photography team, you have sourcing, logistics, you have all these people that are already in play,
Yes.
and you were essentially just either utilizing their talents and resources for your brands, or they just purchase you outright and they're becoming your company. So
Sure.
that makes sense to me, in that regards.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're seeing actual businesses and aggregators taking part in now, or is that the very beginning of it? We're
Yeah.
still adapting.
So it is the very beginning of all the things, right? But even within that, there are little bubbles of other things going on, right? And so, you know, um, the thing, and I want to kind of paint a picture here, just because there's a couple pictures that need to be painted, because it just kind of comes to this moment, right? And been trying to write a blog entry, and every time I pick it up, I have to set it down because something changed literally that week, kind of thing. And that's the environment we're in. Um, Obviously everybody, you hear the news about the hiring problem, right? You can't hire McDonald's workers, right? Which is true, right? But let's say, if you draw even smaller circle within that, you really can't hire, like, in the e-commerce space right now, tech workers, right? And everybody's screaming for Shopify talent, and Salesforce, and people that are savvy and all that, right? And they've always been for the last 20 years. And then within that small circle, you've got this people that are screaming for Amazon talent, which is kind of within the the e-commerce bubble. Though I would imagine it's almost becoming the size of the e-commerce bubble, right? And within that, there's people that are screaming for talent because there's even fewer, right? And what I would say, and I say this in all earnesty, earnest, it was a point when I started like 3 years ago. I think, like, Prosper Show, which is kind of the biggest growing network, that probably represented a very large chunk of the community that could actually do this stuff well, right? And their attendance, let's say, was 5,000 people, right? So that's what all of these people have to compete for, is that kind of talent pool. And I would say also within this, it's not just it's not you might have a programmer, right? But do you have a good programmer? No. I mean, do you have a good salesperson? You have a salesperson, but is that person like an 11, or is that person like a 5? Because
Right.
guess what? It all goes straight to sales, right? It all ends up in your Amazon sales. Everything's measured in sales, as it always should be, or always was, right? But it's like real time sales, right? So if you don't know what you're doing, and with respect to even just paid, much less earned media, and much less organic media, and all the other things, creative, and all these things, you're not doing. I'm kind of rambling here, but you're not doing all the things right. So your sales is less, right? So to your team comment, if I want to go into a race, I want to go into the Grand Prix, right? I could train my own, from scratch, just some raggedy scrag tack guys that think they can put a team together and a car together and learn how to do this stuff, right? And eventually, 20 years from now, boy, we won, but never mind the area under the curve and all the races that you lost in the meantime, right? But that said, or you can try and hire a team, right? They're all sniping from each other. By the time you put some of those together, you're gonna make some mistakes on, wow, this guy said he could do this, but now it apparently doesn't do that. I see a lot of that because this stuff's hard, right? And so you can put that team together, a ragtag group that will eventually coalesce and eventually win a race. So you only lose 5 races, right? And which is sales, right? It's winnings. Or you can go out and buy the F1 racing teams that are out there. By the way, there's only like 100 of them, right? Or whatever you're looking for. They're at a premium, right?
Right. And that's the thing is, right, is experience is the eye of the beholder, right? You've done it, you run a brand, you are experiencing a certain vicinity of e-commerce. And how, like, I guess breaking this down further, where are the
Sure.
areas of need? Is it logistics? Is it marketing? Is it all? Like, what are the most dire needs that you're hearing right now from the aggregator space, that they're just like, we can't find enough people of this? Like,
Yeah.
we would love 8s, but only 4s exist. Like, we would love not perfect, but we would love at least this.
Yeah.
And what is this to those people right now?
You mean like what's,
What's the space that people are lacking in? Like, there's not a lot of,
so
and they're just yearning for those kinds of people power.
yeah, so if you look at that bubble of knowledge that people are trying to solve for, right? I think it's closer to empty than full, right? What I mean by that is that no one knows what's going on, right? And I think that it compounds to the problem. It's kind of another thing I want to talk about in this, is, again, kind of how, and emphasize how hard it is, right? In every one of those spaces, right? For instance, you could be doing all the things right. You're humming along your sales. You've got the optimizations down, and optimization alone involves getting 50 things right. Okay. And having somebody that knows how to do that and measure it and A/B test and come back to you and say, and be a willing, working partner that says, what about these things? And what about this approach? Can you dislodge a little bit more of the budget for this? Because, we're seeing these returns. And, oh, but there's a new ad type this week. By the way, there was 9 ad types right last week, right? New ad types popping up all the time, in different platforms. What do we do with that? So you have, it's really hard, right? You have to know this stuff. You kind of have to eat, breathe, and drink it, and put up with Amazon not helping you whatsoever, right? So to answer your question, it's closer to no one knows what's going on. There's people that's like almost like people like find pieces and they test things out and they figure it out, sort of the parts of the elephant kind of approach. But there's no, you know, it's closer to saying like you have to start every conversation from the start because everybody's coming out of a different perspective, but kind of no one knows all the things that are going on, if that makes sense, in the Amazon
Yeah.
world. It's
Well,
new.
and going back to what an aggregator's charge is, right? We'll go back to they're talking to investors, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, these are people who are they're raising money from. And at a certain point, they have to measure a certain metrics. Hey, we're going to have a return on this amount. We're going to hire this amount of people. We're going to have this many brands. We're going to have this much in recurring revenue, so on and so forth, right? So it's
Yeah.
a speed test. Like this is the speed test of which they're doing. Otherwise, they pull funding, they lose it, or you pay a really big penalty for it. That's how I
Yes.
understand it.
Yes.
In that regards, because it's a speed test, and because there's no like long-term vision and so short-term, if I'm a seller, is the ball in the seller's court in this regards, or is it in the like who is winning right now in this regards? Like who's benefiting the most beside maybe a seller because they're going to get 10x for the product that may not actually be worth 10x, but someone said they would be willing to do it. Is
Yeah.
it going to be just people who are operating these brands, or is it going to be like I'm trying to figure out like the next step, right? Of
Yeah.
because it doesn't seem like a lot of people are thinking long term. They want to do it quicker, faster, more effective. There's
Yes.
all these funds and raises being boom, 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 boom as quickly as possible.
Yes. It's gonna maybe the root of your question is it gonna come crashing down, or is that what
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it doesn't see. It's almost like if as if you were running through fog and you
Yep.
don't see the brick wall in front of you and you can't ebb and flow. Even though that is possible, if you slow down a little bit and just took steps and methodically through it,
Yeah.
that doesn't seem like the business
What your
itself is
investors want.
set up
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're fighting both of I want to make good long-term plays. I don't want to buy crap.
Yeah.
Again,
We,
essentially, I've heard people say I've bought brands that are crap, and that's their phrasing, and
yeah.
that makes sense. But I also you want people that say like they trust the process, they're just going to go with them. And how do you marry the two together?
Yeah. I mean, what's the price for like making a mistake here? I mean, and you kind of alluded to it as well. It's like, first of all, these guys are funded with debt that's not going to be conducive to to lackadaisical sales or learning while we go, right? Or anything less or more than the 300% increase or whatever they promised the investors, but also the brand owner that is going to get paid out based on, like, I sold my brand for 3 million, but two of that's based on them hitting 300% sales for it, and they say they've got a better team than the blood, sweat, tears, late nights that I put into it, right? And it turns out, right, and anybody that is an aggregator out there, we know we want nothing but your success, right? I mean,
Right. That this is not to lack of a better word shit on aggregators.
no,
This is a I see this from a different perspective than Liz. You see this when working with these people. I think like the community at large is asking lots of these questions. So when I say community, again, it's like both sellers, it's service providers, it's agencies, it's all these people in play. And it's exciting. And everyone's like, oh, the shiny new toy in the room. You want the shiny new toy to like make a pathway so that there's success for everyone involved, right?
yeah,
I don't think that there would ever be a person like, I won't hope they crash and burn. Therefore, we can obviously succeed and grow. That is not the case whatsoever. I'm almost like more worried of which there's all these
yeah,
different options available. Amazingly, they all say they can do the same thing at scale that we can build on your business. We're going to take over your brand. You're going to make the right choice with us, and this is what we focus on. And
yeah,
every pitch is in very similar context. Like it's a quick close. We're going to do due diligence and all those different things. I would be just hesitant to see kind of letting my brain grow that again I'm emotionally attached to, which a lot of people are.
yes,
And I've heard people like just see their brain crash and burn, and that's a hard thing to feel, and you can't really recover that.
yeah.
It's a
There,
PR thing.
when you're, I don't know, going at light speed, right? I mean, there's going to be, and I don't mean to be callous, but maybe there's a better word than there's going to be some casualties, right? There's going to be some learning, there's going to be some stumbling, right? And again, we want the success for everyone in the space. We want, one of the things that's missing for all of us is a astronomical IPO in this space. That just this lights it on fire. The Netscape or the or the Facebook, right? That just lights, sets the next 5-10 years into a bubble, an Amazon.com bubble, where yeah, there's going to be a back end of all this, and some people got paid more than they thought they should be paid, or are getting paid more than they should. But those innovators, created something, right? So blah blah blah. And the reason I say that is I have gray hair. I can say that it has the same feel as the late 90s, right? It has that same .com feel right now. And I'm sort of over on the hill, like screaming, like, ahead of it before, so everybody can sort of participate in that, right? So that said, some of the challenges, obviously hiring is a huge thing, but it becomes even more of a challenge that it kind of gets to the baby owning, if I may. And I'm going to kind of, just give me a couple paragraphs on this. Is that,
Good.
okay, so they have to grow the brand. They have to grow the baby. They own the baby, right? And so growing the brand involves much more. And when there is, we can argue about they're focusing on paid media and whether that's sort of artificially inflating, they're buying their sales kind of thing to kind of ease, some of the transition of these brands into their walls, right? One can argue some of that stuff going on, but you have to grow it organically. You have to grow it earned. You have to grow it creatively. You have to grow. In some cases, you have to rebrand. In some cases, you have to create, a voice with the storyboard. I mean, these are terms that aren't being used in the industry right now by anyone. Okay, this is the old traditional, digital world that needs to come in. Some of those members need to come in, lead the way on what actually brand building is. Okay, what that actually means. That doesn't mean just increasing Amazon sales. That means, yes, increasing your presence on Amazon in a number of ways, and it could be explosive if you do all the things right. But there's Walmart, and there's really almost hundreds, depending on the niche, of smaller marketplaces, and certainly the international play is there too for the first time. So again, the stakes of getting it wrong, of getting even just one member in that team that just doesn't change tires very well, and you've got to replace that guy 4 times before you can actually, win the next race. When the competition just keep beating you because the guy's just not changing the tires fast enough, right? Well, if you hire a team that has a certain performance that's done this before, you avoid some of that, And so agencies, which is where I'm going to, I'll get into what I do right now, but I mean, essentially, that's where I think agencies are so valuable. I keep coming back to that.
Absolutely. And that was the thing, is those teams already do exist out there. Is this mentality, because I know we talked offline and before this, is this something that people are like understanding? Oh my gosh, like this makes complete sense. Why wouldn't you marry these two ideas together, whether it be for business purposes or for just sheer profitability purposes? That these partnerships should be made. And again, there's that network, that handshake, that matchmaking ability of, why not take economies of scale and marry them with needs of scale, and put those two together. So all, which is a natural transition to the acquihire, which I know you are putting together, correct?
Yeah. So the first part of that question was, am I seeing it out there? Yes. I'm aware, and I always double what I'm not aware. Maybe I should quadruple it. Is there are 6 or 8 agencies in final discussions with aggregator type entities. Okay. There have been examples before that. Buy Box Experts was, bought by Spreetail. Again, not technically an aggregator, more of an accelerator, or definitely an accelerator. But the idea is absolutely that these are the people that know how to do this stuff, right? And I think people are just waking up because, again, there's a perception like this is just like as easy as some other technology, or as easy as something else to learn. Like, oh, it's easy as like figure out how to do Google AdWords, right? That's easy, right? And there's plenty of people to do that. This is, let's just move on from that. Well, the thing that people don't realize is that there's a lot of things that go wrong with Amazon, right? There's a lot of issues. There's problems with shipping. There's reimbursements. There's, uh, issues with labeling, delisting. I mean, again, optimization, which is just a never-ending pool to solve for, right? It just goes on, and there's headaches, customer support, all that kind of thing. And I think that layer, I'm actually running into agencies that's all they do. They've actually created agencies that do the stuff that the other agencies that are focused on marketing and optimization, they don't want to do either.
Yeah,
Right.
it's the I won't say this sounds bad. The garbage people of the service industry of do the things that no one else wants to do, the glorified
Yeah.
positions. But hey, guess what? Garbage people get paid.
Everybody needs
Give
a
a lot of
garbage
money.
man.
And if it
Exactly.
doesn't work, yeah, if you everyone needs it and no one wants to talk about it or go into it, but people that do, handsomely
Yeah.
rewarded, can literally clean up figuratively and literally in that regards. So which is why I guess in the final 5 minutes that we have on the show, gosh, I can only imagine again, both for any industry, whether it be service, agency or aggregator or accelerator at scale in moving forward 6 months from now. We're going to be talking and looking at this moment right here and
Yeah.
say, I can't believe that pivot from person X. And then you see the waves start to shift that way, whether it be on Amazon or whether it be on just industry responses, right? You're seeing it in the SaaS world right now of everyone freaking out. Everyone that has access to certain MWS files and access with Amazon, there's agencies and services that are just getting kaput because of the tactics that we're doing. And again, notoriously rebate key and recently because of ranking services and whatnot,
Yeah.
elite seller, good company. But again, because of how Amazon sees it in that moment, that's kind of the unknown, right? How will Amazon see these services and companies in the next 4 months, 6 months, 12 months from now? And that's hard to forecast for too,
Yeah.
correct?
Well, I mean, they're, I don't know if the risk is there for them in the sense that, I mean, some of those examples were doing some sort of back end, sort of using the
Right.
API and
Again, I'm
pulling
not.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, aggregators sell a seller. I mean, they're all sellers, right? And so I think in the end, Amazon doesn't have any problem with them. My question is actually more the flip side of that table is why are they not helping them more? And in fact, I think that the human capital problem in the space is actually will be a limiting factor of sales on the marketplace because it helps we polish those, I say we, but the community polishes those listings, and they deal with all their problems. We could go elsewhere, I mean, theoretically we can't, but I mean, the community could. I mean, if there's somebody from Amazon listening, it's like, why are you not, why is there no dev program per se? I mean, there is technically, but Microsoft, the first thing that Microsoft developed after they launched the software was a development program for the community, not only the business side of this stuff, but also the programmers and all the audiences of everybody that would tout your platform. There's none of that. There's not even a
Which is
phone number. You know what I mean?
well, right, and that's the question everyone asks in the space is if they're trying to educate. Again, why is there not more help on this? And I think recently there was actually more of an actual good response from the most recent Amazon news conference of, hey, we're releasing tools, like it's coming directly
Yes.
from us, and it's actually going to, in certain senses, be better than what exists out there. And I think that's maybe a step in the right direction. But again, with one pro, it always feels like there's a twist. Like I'm waiting for it. Like hit me with it. So
Right.
again, why is there that kind of not help when it's majority of where the sales are coming from? Again, that everyone speculates on every certain aspect, and that's what's frustrating. But there's other emerging platforms. I guess my final question is: do we see in the Amazon aggregator space? Do you see more people? And this is the shift that I love talking about too. People are not just looking for brands that are on Amazon and try to take them omni-channel, but off of Amazon, and then really take their loyalty and following, put them on Amazon, and say, "Watch out! Like here we go." I know it's a little bit more challenging, but is that another iteration that you're seeing people start to shift and focus more off brand, a little bit tougher, find the diamond in the rough and put it on, and then let people at it?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, there's all of those things going on. I mean, there's so much going on in like the distributor world too. I mean, I don't mean to pivot and not answer your question, but like one thing that's interesting is like the distributors that existed that distributed product around the world are realizing they're a really good place to put product straight up on Amazon, right? Just cutting
Mhm.
out the whole, all the
Be
daisy
their own
chain. Yeah,
brand.
because
Mhm.
it's either that or somebody else, their guy going to do it. The people they sell product to is going to put it up, right? And so
Mhm.
now they have 10,000 listings to manage on Amazon and that kind of stuff. So, there is opportunity everywhere. If you're a brand owner, you're in an awesome place. If you're an agency owner, my gosh, call me. Okay. If you're an aggregator, as long as you get this right, what a brilliant model. Awesome. And so if I may, we'll leave it there. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was going to say for Chris, obviously, I know you've been on the show. And how do people get in touch with you? The best way to do that was LinkedIn or on your website.
Yeah, it's nReach without an I, nReach. I'm Chris at nReach. Reach out on LinkedIn, and we have contact info below as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I know we already took a couple more minutes of your time than
it's all good. I'm sorry about that, Lauren.
No, I was gonna say, well, I'm hearing dinging in my ear, and that's just my computer saying, "Hey, idiot, you have another meeting or you need to get off your podcast." So let other people do their jobs. Hey, thank you so much. I think the programs are amazing. You're helping lots of people. We'll have you on again for sure. But thank you again for hopping on Crossover Conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Chris. And again, everyone else who is tuning in and listening to us on Crossover Commerce, thanks again for hopping on episode 174. Again, we talked about Amazon Aggregator Challenges, kind of put our crystal ball in front of us, our fortune telling hats on, and really just surveying the landscape. Again, we hope this succeeds. We want lots of this success to happen. There are challenges, and we want to bring those to light and really talk through what that means now, 6 months from now, through Q4, everything like that. But stay tuned, put a pin on this. We'll have to circle back here in Q1, Q2, and see what the next iteration of this truly does look like. I'm Ryan Kramer. This is Crossover Commerce. We'll catch you guys tomorrow on another episode. Take care.